Hi, my name is Tracy Spears, and I'm here again with my guest, JoAnn Huber. And it just dawned on me that I didn't even let you introduce yourself. Like, I was so excited to just jump in and talk to you that
fun.
you said nothing about you. So I'm going to pause, and so tell us a little bit about you.
Well, I keep changing my careers. I started out as a nurse in a former life, and then I became a clinical social worker, and then about 2009 I got ordained as an Interfaith Minister. So the bulk of my career I worked as a clinical social worker.
Okay.
And so I don't know what I'll do when I grow
I
up.
was going to say, one of the questions at the end will be what's next. So it'll
Yeah.
be fun to hear what the answer is. When I met you, you were actually a counselor at a family Christian counseling service, which we're going to talk about that. But like, when I walked in and saw that, I was like, oh yeah, this probably isn't going to be good for me because of my connection to religion and all that. So I don't know if you want to talk about that, but
Sure, go for it.
well, so my first introduction to, religion was I grew up at 848 North 91st Place in Tulsa, which is in a trailer park on the Mingo Valley traffic circle. And I was in, I think it was like the 4th grade. And I remember getting up one Sunday morning and running out, to the living room. And we're on the last street of the trailer park, and you could see the church bus coming. And so here comes the church bus. My mom, walks out from her bedroom, and she's like, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I'm going to church." And she looked at me up and down. She goes, "You can't go to church unless you wear a dress." And I was like, "Oh my gosh!" Like, my first thought was, "I'll never go to church." Literally, like that was my thought. It wasn't, okay, I guess I'll go wear a dress. My curiosity ended right then because of the rules of church. So
There's a lot of them.
I know. So that was how I started out on my, journey to religion.
Yeah.
So, but you have given me this, you've graced me with a different perspective about what religion is and isn't. And so when I, talk about being a reverend, it doesn't feel like I'm in a box in our conversations. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yes, right. Religions, all of them, have a lot of rules. And most of them, in my mind, aren't necessary. The rules get made, it seems, to keep the denomination together or to keep a congregation together and to keep people in line. And I see God as bigger than that.
Right?
And that many times people that function out of religion will try to put God in a box, a tiny little box oftentimes, and it's a narrow line. And I think God is much bigger than that. God cannot be boxed, because if you think of God as the creator of the universe, then that is always bigger than we are.
Right.
In my practice, I would kind of chuckle at people sometimes, because I worked with a lot of Christian people, and they'd say, "When will I be done?" Meaning done with therapy, or "When will I arrive?" And I would just laugh at them.
Yeah.
I said, if you can really arrive and be completely done, then you're as big as God. And do you really want to?
Interesting.
It's an ongoing process your entire life. As long as you draw breath, you have the capacity, or at least the potential, for more growth and learning and changing. And I think that's one of the greatest gifts from God.
Well, I like that. I struggle with all the titles and all the boxes and all that. Like, when people would say, I'm a God-fearing woman, I'd be like, wow, that doesn't sound like a God I'm interested in, like all of those things that happen. So I'm still searching, right? I'm still in the middle of that, agnostic, atheist, Christian, Buddhist. Like,
Sure.
I'm curious about all of it. For me, I guess the only thing I could come to say would be God for me would be love. It would be that.
Sure.
That sounds so, I sound like a hippie, but I don't mean it that way. I mean, like, that connection.
That's right out of the Bible. God is love.
See, look at me.
Yeah, God is love, and
Yeah.
it says He, but I say God is love, and she who abides in love abides in God, and God in her, because it's all about love. So a lot of people are comfortable with the God language, because when we think of God, we think of, you ask people to draw a picture of God, and it's this male with the big beard and bushy hair, and, well, I don't see God as male. Or if God is male, God is equally female.
I think it's a big, beautiful black woman, if I had to put it.
Yeah, right. There, you've seen the movie, yes, yeah. Yeah,
I did, but
it's so we have to look at. When the feminist movement really got going, I think it was Mary Daly who said, great feminist author, and she said, if God is male, then male is God.
Okay.
And so women would put men on the pedestal. And a man could say one thing and a woman say the exact same thing, but he would be heard and she wouldn't, because men are on the pedestal.
But didn't you just describe our society?
As that, yeah, exactly.
Right.
And so there's a lot of pushback. I mean, men have had to give up what I would call power, because if you're God, as people see you, and there's a lot of religions that still function that way,
Sure.
where women aren't allowed to teach. Even teenage girls, they can't teach teenage boys. They're not allowed to be on the altars in certain churches, or to stand up and teach, make a comment in a church. So that's still very real for a lot of people. And I call that spiritual abuse when it's at its extremes.
Well, it is. I've been into a few churches, not many in my day, just to be transparent. And I went to a funeral not too long ago, and they were, I was watching people go through all these rituals when they walked in and all that. And part of me was like, I get that, like the ritual part.
Ritual is rich.
Yeah,
I love ritual.
I could see that. But then when they said, whatever the rule was, if you could have communion or not, of course I was not going to walk down there and do it, but just the idea that somebody said I couldn't, and that there was a conversation on the pew that, well, that you can't, go down there. And I was like, what about this all-inclusive God thing? Like, what, that's
It
just
isn't
a problem I
all-inclusive
have.
for some people, and it's those rules things because they want you to take it seriously. I was raised Catholic, and there's much about the Catholic Church that I really, really love. And I like its wisdom, and I like its focus on social justice. But some of the rules things really, really troubled me, like not ordaining women, for one. And they have a real strong thing about Catholic people are not supposed to receive communion in any other church except in the Catholic Church. And if you're not Catholic, you're not supposed to receive communion. Well, I have some real struggles with that because I don't think Jesus excluded anybody. And so some of the teachings are, they don't make sense to me.
Yeah.
They just don't make sense because it doesn't seem welcoming, inviting. If I'm not going to invite you to my table, why did I want you to come to dinner?
Right?
I mean, and so I don't agree with the teachings. I know why they teach them. I mean, I've studied all that stuff, but I don't agree with it. And we place in Catholicism, there's a real emphasis on the Eucharist, the bread.
Yeah.
And they have adoration of the Eucharist where people go and pray. But Jesus is also in the body of Christ, the people. And if we really, really believe that Jesus is in the body, the people, the community of the people, as much as in the Word, and in that host, we bow down to that host in prayer. We should equally be ready to bow down to each other in prayer, because God is in us.
Yeah. So that all kind of connects with me for sure. So much more so than what my experience has been and what I think a lot of people experience when they go to church. But I also understand that what people, my sense is that the real connection is the community that you get from like-minded people and all that. So I understand why it's so powerful. But
well, everybody needs a tribe.
Yeah.
Somebody that is home, and I enjoy that piece of a church community.
Yeah.
When you can connect with people, unless it's a very rigid community, then I don't feel at home there.
Yeah. I have a tribe for sure, and I actually sent a text to my tribe. On our list it says tribe, and that I've missed connecting with them. But when I think about what they bring to my life, that however you get that, I'm all for.
Sure.
Those people that no matter what, they're going to be there for you, and so that's
It's very, very important, and the thing that happens at church is it starts excluding. You're excluded in this, that, or the other way, and all of them do it in some way.
Yeah.
And it's the exclusion that makes us not okay, I think, because Jesus didn't exclude anybody.
Right.
And we get all this stuff about we're a Christian nation. Well, excuse me, then let's act like we're a Christian nation and open our arms and be welcoming.
Yeah. Well, that is not my experience. And it's not a lot of people's experience with
Yeah.
that. And you hate to say that you throw some entire group of people out because of the way a couple of people are, but I assume this is the struggle that most people are going through with what religion, the role that religion can
If
play
you
in their life.
question at all, and some people are just content to be there.
Yeah.
You know, it's like there's a saying about churches: 20% of the people do 80% of the work.
Okay.
You know.
Yeah.
And so some people are just there because that's what they need. It gives them solace. They don't question. You know, I was raised by a dad who told me to question everything, so I did, and I do.
Nice. Well, that's why you have because I can connect with you on this topic about whether it's Buddhism or any of it in a way that I never feel stupid and I never feel that I'm wrong. Like it's an exploration. Like we've had a conversation about atheism, and is that the right word? And why don't you define what an atheist is, what agnostic is? Do you mind doing that?
No, I don't mind,
Okay.
but I just want to, I'm not a theologian,
Okay.
you know, and I'm not an expert, you know, on these things. I read a lot, but an atheist is somebody who doesn't believe there is a God.
Okay.
An agnostic would believe, my dad was an agnostic, and he always said, I believe there's a supreme being, but he didn't want anything to do with religion.
Okay.
And then it goes from there, you know.
So I guess I would be agnostic in your definition of that.
Yeah,
Okay.
I would think so.
Yeah. I do think that, you know, the connection and all of those things that weave us together, there has to be something. My worry is that and I guess this war has been going on forever, you know, which religion is right and the fanatical.
Well, there's truth in all of them. And even the Catholic Pope has said, I don't even think it was this one. I think it was the prior Pope. He said, find truth wherever it is. And it's in all religions. And, you know, there's a lot of concern of that, like among Christians in particular, that, well, we're still up here and they're down here, some of them. But you find truth. There's an old Chinese proverb that I read as a young person, and it says, there's my truth, your truth, and the truth.
Right.
And the truth is the big overarching thing. But all of the religions have basically, I'll say the golden rule, you know, that kind of thing in common. But there's other things too, the care for each other and that sort of thing. All religions get stupid. And have schisms and you know, and get so caught up. What we could say is you start majoring in minors. But all religion, the Bible too, was written from a political perspective. Why are some books in and some out? How come some books got thrown out at the time of the Reformation? I mean, it's just craziness because we don't know how to get along. We're not very good, and so Jesus really came, in my mind, to teach us how to be human, fully human, not to save us from our sins, but teach us how to be fully human and able to love each other more effectively, which then includes accepting each other, not judging each other, opening our arms to people, you know, whether they be Muslim or Hindu or Sufi or Christian, you know, just opening our arms and say, what can we learn? How can we make this beautiful world better? And I think that we're invited to be co-creators, you know, with God.
Yeah, I like that. I like the idea that I have some say-so in what happens, the idea of free will. Like, I think when people start saying, well, it was God's plan, whatever's going to happen is going to happen, I always feel so useless in that. Like, well, then what, you know, why am I going to do anything if he's got it all figured out? And it's,
well, and people struggle with the whole bit about suffering. If God is a loving God, how come people suffer? Well, I think people suffer because we are the body of Christ. I'll use Christian language. We are the body of Christ. And Christ is big. Christ preceded Jesus, you know, because Jesus is God as Christ. So if we're the body of Christ, and that's inclusive. And we have the hands and arms and brains and wisdom to take care of the hurting people. But we choose not to. We don't have the political will. We're not generous enough. Maybe we're just greedy, mean, or whatever. But I think that's how we become co-creators. We create new ways. And, you know, you always have to take the long view because, you know, the Code of Hammurabi says, you know, you could whack somebody if they stole your chicken. you could kill them. And then the Mosaic law comes along, and it's you can't whack somebody. It's an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. All those laws developed, and then Jesus came along, and it was all a law of love. Love your neighbor as much as you love yourself, or as you would.
Now, I'd go to that church. That was the only thing that was talked about, right? The idea that you were more, you were less rigid about all of the rules that have to happen, and more about whatever it is, I'm going to love you anyway, right? Like that.
Come to the Force Peace
I
on
know,
Sunday
right?
mornings.
I
Check us
realized
out.
there was going to be a close coming in here. Let's talk about that. You have this amazing retreat.
There's this retreat center in Sand Springs, Oklahoma, called the Osage Forest of Peace. It sits on 45 acres out in the middle of the woods, and there's about 3 miles of hiking trails. There's cabins that you can rent and stay for a day or a month or a weekend, and there's a main chapel, and meals are served. There's 5 people that live on site.
Okay.
And they pray together 3 times a day, and any guest that's there is welcome to join those prayer times, and you'll get in those prayer times a sampling of Christianity and Buddhism and Hinduism in those prayers, because it's an interfaith place. So people of all faiths or no faith are welcome. It's open and friendly to LGBTQ folks.
Nice.
So it's just a magnificent place. It's very, very simple.
And you're not one of the 5 that live there.
No, I don't live there. I live
Okay.
in Tulsa, but I
Okay.
go out there weekly on Sunday mornings, and then I go out there and I haul brush and trim trees and work in the woods.
I've
And
seen some pictures of you on Facebook doing all that. There's a lot.
and so I just enjoy being outside in the woods. But I'm the president of the board currently, and so it's a wonderful place. Come see us.
I know you're super passionate about it, and anything you're passionate about, of course, has my curiosity, because I think you're so super smart. So it makes me curious. But you told me something about that place that's kind of like rolling around the back of my head.
What's
that
that?
Sometimes people go and do like a weekend of silence or a week of silence.
Yeah. It's
So,
a
of course-
contemplative retreat center, so silence is an important part of the place.
Okay.
And like, for example, in the mornings, breakfast is sort of self-serve. The stuff is out, but it's a cold breakfast or toast, you know. And but it's silent until 8:30.
Okay. So everybody's silent.
Everybody's silent. You
Okay.
eat in silence. And then there's other periods of time in the main building where silence is maintained. But even when you're not in the building, you're encouraged to maintain a tone of silence, not loud talk or rowdiness or whatever. And
This would be very hard for me. Before
also be very good for you.
I know before you walked in, I had disco music blaring and all that, trying to feel the energy in the room. So, but so when people do that, what's the goal there?
Well, people come with their own goals, but our whole culture, first of all, people aren't in nature very much anymore.
Right.
And so that's really wonderful. And lots of times, if in the mornings and the evenings when you're sitting on your cabin porch or something, deer walk past and you get to watch them, and other little critters. There's also snakes, which I find fascinating, just to watch them.
Okay, like that. It's my biggest fear.
Well, they
ever.
leave us alone
Okay.
typically, but they're interesting to watch, and they're part of God's creation too.
That's
And-
one question I will never be able to answer. What did that snake look like? Because right? Did it have a pattern on its back?
Yeah, right. Okay, I'll show you some pictures. But people will often come because maybe they're overwhelmed at work, or they've got some grief issues going on, or maybe they've been working with a therapist and they just need time to digest something.
Okay.
Or they've had relationship struggles, or it could be any number of reasons. But it's really noticeable when people come just as individuals, and they'll show up on Friday looking a little haggard.
Yeah.
And they just will sleep a lot extra because they're sleep deprived, as most of the country is anymore.
Right.
But by the time they leave a few days later, you can just see them looking lighter. Their countenance has visibly changed.
Wow. And do you think that's because in the silence they've figured things out that
Well,
what
they've
happens?
allowed themselves rest, maybe.
Okay.
But yeah, sometimes
sounds really
people
good about
figure. Yeah, And people come, they'll bring stacks of books and they're going to get a lot of reading done. They discover they just sleep because they're just tired. But it's not just physical tired, like lack of sleep, but it's that emotional exhaustion because the craziness of the busies has taken over my life and I need something.
Well, I think if you just like turned off your cell phone, which I assume this is that place that you should, or
well, they have Wi-Fi available and cell phone coverage out there, but most of the people don't use them unless they do in their cabins.
Yeah, it is. That's really an interesting development, the way the technology has played in the way we navigate, whether it's grief, all those things that you said. So I can imagine though, if you take all that away and you're left with your own thoughts, one is it would scare the hell out of most people, right?
It does. It can be very, very scary.
Yeah.
And silence can be, that's why it's nice to have staff out there because they have people they can talk to, or if they want some spiritual direction kind of conversation, that's available. But yeah, it is scary for some people. And if some people enter sustained silence, it can actually be a little dangerous. Many, many years ago, I was working with some people, and one of them was just so attached to the computer screen, and the other person just watched TV out of self-defense kind of thing.
Sure.
And so school was about to be out, so we made an agreement that they would turn off all screens when school got out, and go for 2 weeks with no screens. And by the end of the first week, one of them was suicidal.
Oh, wow.
Because so much surfaced that couldn't be run away from.
Wow.
And so we had to work with that. And when I was in the hospital, we had it's kind of like an isolation room, but we didn't use it for that. And so it was just there. It was a room right next to the nursing station, had a window in the door, and I would give clients the assignment just to go sit in there for 5 minutes and leave the door open, lights in. They could hear all the people around it, but just leave the light off and just kind of sit in the dark. Most of them couldn't do it because they were so afraid of themselves and what would come up. And so when you give yourself the gift of silence, when you're not used to it, it can be very, very frightening.
Yeah.
It's not that I'm averse to music, but I live in silence most of the time.
Do you?
When I'm home by myself, if I'm not talking to a client or something, I don't have the radio on. I never turn the TV on. Now the kind of technology is I don't know how to turn the TV on.
There's that.
But I didn't anyway. And many years ago, when I was a single mom, I had to choose how was I going to use my time because there wasn't much time.
Sure.
And I chose to read instead of to watch TV. And so when I read, in the summers and at Christmas time, my pattern had been I would read novels. Those were like gifts to myself.
Sure.
And a lot of other stuff I was reading would be spiritual stuff, theology stuff, nonfiction. And so when I'm reading, I will stop and just ponder and have a lot of silence around what I read. And in the house, even if I'm doing a task, I'm silent. So I feed myself that way. But that's because I'm introverted too.
Yeah.
Much more introverted, and the silence helps restore me. And the silence of nature, when I'm out working, it's silent, and it's a contemplative kind of experience for me.
I, as you know, have this little, cabin that I go to on the weekends. When you were talking about your retreat, it's kind of been my retreat, and it was what was so important and is so important for me is it's that you drive in the gate and people comment how your blood pressure goes down and all that. Some of that has to be that you don't have the electricity and the energy of the city, for sure. But I think once you get there, it is that place where you can be more, I'm going to say still, although I might be, carrying firewood or doing things, I do feel more at peace though in that environment.
It's a complete change of pace for you. You're not focused on work or producing something.
Yeah.
Being productive in that way. You just kind of get in a different flow.
Yeah.
And when you pull in, if you feel yourself settle. When I drive out to the retreat center, when my car tires hit the gravel, and lots of people say that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Lots of people say that.
I think too many people don't have that experience, right? They don't have that place that they can go to. So, well.
And so you could experiment when you go to your place, don't have the music on, be in silence.
I do. I will say that I probably do that now more so, you know, because I can think when I first got it, I didn't have TV, I didn't have anything, and I think it saved me in a lot of ways.
Sure.
You know? It was.
Yeah.
It was.
Well, it gives your brain rest.
Yeah, for sure.
And we know now, too, that's what sleep does and how important sleep is.
Right.
And our whole culture lives sleep deprived. And there's damage. You die earlier, and you have more illness. You're less productive. There's all kind of reasons to sleep.
We do the Maslow's hierarchy when we do our training, and you know, if people have never even heard of Maslow's hierarchy, just that the idea that there's a pyramid of you know, fundamental needs that have to be met, and the ultimate goal is to operate out of the best parts of all your personality. And the very foundation is food, water, and rest, right? So it's, you know, we've known it for a long time, but we aren't eating the right food. We're not, you know, we're dehydrated as, you know, typically, and, you know, we're not resting enough. And so when you think about that, we're in a compromised state walking around the moment we wake up.
Yes,
oftentimes.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And what keeps us from sleeping? We're worried. We're planning the next day.
Yeah.
And really, we need between 7 and 8 a night.
Yeah. Well, when I started studying the Maslow's hierarchy, not, okay, I have to know it for a school, but to teach it in leadership workshops. And the line that, you know, comes out of that is that your behavior is determined by your unmet needs. So that's really what that means for me. And I heard somebody super smart say that one time, and I thought, oh yeah, that's exactly what it means. That if your behavior comes from your unmet needs, you have to then get curious about what your needs are. But most people don't get curious about it. Most people just walk around in that compromised state. And I think that's a lack of awareness, right?
Well, it is a lack of awareness. I think our whole culture teaches us kind of to not be curious.
True.
You know, educational systems now, you must learn this, and it's gotten narrower in funding, and so there's less opportunity to explore. But even with kids, we put them all in these organized activities, and we don't give them free play where their curiosity just flows and goes. And I have a picture of 2 of my grandkids, these little boys. It was last summer, so they would have been 5 and 2. And they're sitting cross-legged, just right next to each other, and the older one's holding a slug. And they're just fascinated by this slug. And there's this old stump next to them just covered with roly-poly bugs. They're poking them.
That's
doing
awesome.
stuff. And just that childhood curiosity that we can foster. And part of that is, what will my body do? So I teach them how to climb trees and move their bodies and know their bodies and their own strength. And it's just fascinating and fun to see it blossoming.
That is funny. I'll always think of you now when I see slugs.
I will put a caveat. I told my kids the grandkids and my kids, not to let them play with slugs. There's actually a disease that slugs are carrying that's very bad.
Oh.
And I learned about it when I was in Hawaii just in January.
Okay.
And I met a woman on a plane whose son got this disease. It's called rat lung disease, which seems odd because it's referencing a slug.
Oh my gosh.
But it really did brain damage on her son. And she moved from Hawaii back to the United States and is continuing to do research on that disease. And she said there has been 1 case of that disease found in Oklahoma.
You're kidding.
So, and it's pretty bad in Hawaii.
See, this is why I like talking to you. Like, I would never know that from any other person. So.
Well, I am very inquisitive about lots of things. And so I love to engage in conversation and learn about those things because we're connected. You know, you think Hawaii's a long ways away. How did that get here to Oklahoma? And and I'm interested in epidemiology as well.
Really?
Yeah, well, that's my nursing
like
background.
Snakes. I mean, that blows my mind.
Well, snakes are great fun. And the fun ones are like the black snakes or the rat snakes. They're harmless. They won't do anything to you at all. But just how they can crawl straight up a tree or off the side of a wooden fence, it's just interesting.
Interesting.
And then I see copperheads too, you know, and I keep my distance. But they're beautiful to watch, and they don't want me. They want me to go away.
Oh, see, I just held my breath through that whole conversation. You started talking about them. It is, and I have friends that are like, well, we need to do the immersion therapy for you. And I said, well, I will miss you because I will never see you again. So I'm telling you, I would miss you if I came out there and you bring a black snake.
Oh, I would not bring one to you.
Okay.
But if you come upon them, you just back up.
Yeah.
You would probably run backwards.
Oh, there's no question.
Yeah.
This is the truth. I'd burst out in tears. It's that bad. Like,
Yeah.
it just makes me cry. Like, I'm going to cry. We're better in this because it's going to make me cry thinking about it. So we started with this amazing conversation about religion, and we're ending on snakes.
But they're also God's creatures.
I know.
So.
I know. Well, I know we will continue this conversation because I have, a lot of questions and really things that I do want to talk about around, religion, because I am in that, curiosity.
There's much to be curious about too. I mean, I'm always curious.
Well, that's the thing. The thing you said that I like most is when you were talking about the structure and all these rules and all that. That if your dad said, taught you to be curious, and you, through all your curiosity, have circled back around and are still here, that makes me curious. So, there you go.
Okay.
Thanks for your time.
All right. Thank you, Tracy. Great fun.
Thank you.